Pokemon games seem to have been going through this downward spiral with every new release. Pokemon Legends ZA being one of the most recent examples of a game to come out and get absolutely flamed after it came out. And for good reason, if you ask me. A couple weeks ago, I made a video about Legends ZA, and being the silly goose I am, said this: Pokemon Legends ZA isn't the worst Pokemon game we have ever gotten. That honor still goes to BDSP. And a lot, and I mean a lot, of people did not like that I said that. And it got me wondering, was I being too harsh on BDSP? It has been a while since I've played it, and all I remember was being extremely disappointed after my first playthrough. So I thought it would be fun if we take a look back at Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl and finally get the answer. Is it the worst Pokemon game, or does the title belong to Legends ZA? Let's jump in. Now, I know BDSP is a remake of a mainline game, and Legends ZA is essentially a spin-off, but in my eyes, it's very fair to compare these games. My reasoning for this is because every other remake that has come out before has been in the same style as the generation we were on. Fire Red and Leaf Green look like Gen 3 games, Soul Silver and Heart Gold look like Gen 4 games, and Auras look like Gen 6 games. With that reasoning, BDSP should have looked like Sword and Shield, but they didn't, not even close. They also were not connected with Sword and Shield at all. BDSP were pretty standalone games, no way to interact with people playing Sword and Shield, where all the other remakes were compatible with current generation games. So I look at BDSP more of a let's go game, a standalone Pokemon spin-off. So with that long drawn explanation out of the way, I think comparing these two games together is totally fine. And it's fun. Let's start off with comparing the world design of both these masterpieces. Pokemon BDSP takes place in modern Sinnoh. I'm sure you're all very aware and have traveled through this world at least once in your life. And I'm happy to say that this part of BDSP is actually pretty good. The world looks great. I can understand the hate for the chibi art style, but everything around it feels and looks good. It might not be at the same level as Zelda's Link's Awakening, which is a little disappointing, but I can't deny that I do enjoy the environments of this game. We have a lot of different locations here with many beautiful sceneries with some amazing music to back all of these locations up. Now compare this to ZA, well, the whole game takes place in Lumio City. Now I'm sure that you're tired of hearing this over and over again, but there are a few key elements I wanted to focus on right now. First is that music. Like I said, there are so many different tracks in BDSP, and many of them match the city or location that you're at perfectly. Then when I went back to play Legends ZA after this video, I realized the music really never changes. It's just the same Lumio City background music the whole time. And it was really disappointing when coming back after BDSP. And I realized I never really noticed this on my first playthrough, and it started to bother me this time. And another element that really stood out to me were the flat textures in both of these games. We all know how bad the windows and doors look in Legends ZA, and when going back to BDSP, you notice that the roofs and the sidewalks have that same flatness to them that the windows do in ZA. The key difference is BDSP being more of a 2D drop-down viewed game. It's harder to notice than in a 3D game like ZA. I think it's interesting that no one ever really brought it up as one of the negatives for BDSP, maybe because there are so many of them, but it just goes to show that the engine that Game Freak uses for Pokemon doesn't seem to work very well for 3D games. And before I forget to mention, yes, this game was developed by Niantic, not Game Freak, but it looks like they're using a lot of the same engine and resources that Game Freak uses, so we'll just toss them in the same bucket at that point. But I have been saying for years that Game Freak really should go back to making 2D games. I think that the art style just favors it a little bit better, and it wouldn't look as jarring as it does in the new 3D games they've been making. But unfortunately, given all the recent leaks, that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. It looks like we are stuck with 3D Pokemon for a little while longer. Now let's talk about traversing the world, because BDSP kind of pisses me off. Running around this game feels atrocious. We all know that in the original DS games, everything was in blocks. You moved in 4 different directions. Everything is basically a square. It's been like that since the very first games. Now, this all changed when X and Y came out, and we have had free walking pretty much since then. So I don't know why it feels so awkward in this game. Maybe because the world was never designed for free running like that, and the layout was obviously tailor-made for the original movement system. So many of the gyms and routes just feel awful to traverse, and many times I would resort to using the D-pad. Even though that doesn't feel great, they did make a lot of improvements here as well. First, your character is much faster in this game. Running, biking, swimming, all a lot faster than they were in the original, and that's great. Also, not needing TMs whatsoever, that is awesome. It's a great change. Gives you a lot more freedom for your team since there is no need for a TM slave anymore. Overall, I'm really torn on BDSP and the changes they made with traversing the world. A lot of times when I was playing it, I really wish they could have pulled it off just a little bit better, especially just running around the overworld. This is something that Legends ZA does pretty well. I think the character movement in ZA is one of the better parts of the game. It's not saying much, but I do think running around with your character feels a lot better than how it felt in Scarlet and Violet, for example. But there is zero excuse for not having any other way to run around the world. We don't get a bike, roller skates, rideable Pokemon, nothing at all in Legends ZA. And it's a huge letdown since we had some great things going for us in Legends Arceus and in Scarlet and Violet. But the mortal sin that both of these games commit is not getting Pokemon following you done right. I have no idea what's been going on with this. Pokemon following you has been such a great addition to Pokemon games. It makes games like Heart Gold and Soul Silver feel great, and it really shows how the mechanic can bring so much to this franchise. But lately, whenever Game Freak introduces following Pokemon, it's always done so horribly. BDSP's following system is so bad that I think it actually takes away from the experience. All of your Pokemon will be too slow to actually follow behind you, every single one of them. And really slow Pokemon like my Torterra won't even try to keep up with you. Luckily, you can choose whether you want a Pokemon to follow you at all, and you can also choose which one follows you in your party. But even when I have the fastest Pokemon on my team, they cannot keep up, which is so weird because when you team up with other characters in BDSP, they're right behind you. They have no issues sticking right behind the player. Legends ZA also introduces following Pokemon to the Legends series, but it has the exact same problem. They just can't keep up. It is such a letdown, especially when you realize that this mechanic was damn near perfect in the DS games. Speaking of DS games, BDSP is very much a faithful remake to the original, and this is 100% to a fault. All of the trainers in the overworld are in the exact same position and levels that they were in the original Diamond and Pearl, but there is one key difference in BDSP: the introduction of EXP share. The original games didn't have this. The level curve wasn't too bad, it definitely wasn't great, but it didn't feel as awkward as something like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But now with BDSP, I would say it feels worse than those games. Your team is so over-leveled in BDSP that you will breeze through all of the gym leaders and bosses. On top of that, Game Freak or Niantic decided to add affection to this game. Whenever your Pokemon's affection is high enough, it can sometimes hang on with 1 HP to avoid fainting. It will show a message like it toughened it out so you wouldn't feel sad. The mechanic was supposed to reward players that have created a bond with their Pokemon, but it sucks. Almost all of the little bit of challenge this game already didn't offer. It's very unfortunate, and it really does make the game feel more boring as you play through it. That is until the Elite Four. The Elite Four in BDSP is crazy. This is the one thing that these remakes did amazing. The jump of difficulty is actually pretty insane, and I am astonished that Game Freak let this slide. All of the Elite Four members got a massive boost compared to the original games. Their teams are fully EV trained, hold competitive items, and have smarter movesets designed to counter common player strategies. Cynthia's Garchomp, for example, is now in level 66 with a diverse move pool that can sweep unprepared teams. It has Poison Jab now because she is covering for fairy weaknesses. I only beat her because I got 2 very lucky rolls for my Gastrodon dodging a move and then surviving a hit because of affection. This makes a rematch in BDSP feel more like a true test of skill, one that demands real strategy and preparation rather than just steamrolling like we have been doing the entire game. And yes, like I said, the affection stat did come into play here, and it was a little disappointing since it definitely took away from the challenge a little bit, but I also wasn't going to restart that fight. But I'm sad that we didn't get more battles like this during the actual game, since it's apparent that the developers had the skills to create interesting and challenging battles. But how does that compare with ZA? ZA is also a cakewalk of a game that has virtually no challenge in it. It does introduce a new battling system, moving away from the traditional turn-based gameplay and more into a hybrid real-time and turn-based game. Overall, it's pretty decent change. I like the freedom we get with our character during the battles, but that's pretty much it. You're technically directing your Pokemon where to attack, but to be honest, it doesn't really feel that impactful. And just like BDSP, you're basically steamrolling every single boss in the game, and unlike BDSP, it does not offer a challenging endgame whatsoever, all the while offering twice as many battles and having Mega Evolution as an option for your opponents. What a missed opportunity for Legends ZA. We could have had some really great battles that would have been interesting, but it doesn't seem like they actually tried. I will say it does look like Mega Dimensions DLC will have somewhat of a difficulty spike, since it looks like some Pokemon will be able to go over level 100. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out, but if the trailer is anything to go by, it does look like the area is supposed to be difficult. Subscribe for my review for Mega Dimensions when that comes out too. Overall, both these games nail certain parts of their world design and gameplay, but they come with way too many shortcomings. At the end of the day, they are still Pokemon games, so there's always going to be a bit of fun and charm there, but both fail to deliver a solid experience that feels truly challenging or provide something new to justify a full price release. Now let's talk about the story, because this is something I really honed in on when I made my Pokemon Legends ZA review. By far, my biggest problem with ZA's story is the lack of villain in the game. Everyone is your friend. No one is a bad guy. Everyone that you assume would end up being the bad guy quickly becomes your best friend. And the final boss being Prism Tower was honestly a huge letdown for me. It kind of felt cheap. And the whole second ultimate weapon thing was totally pulled out of thin air for Legends ZA and was never a part of X and Y's original story. Overall, the story was lackluster and felt like an afterthought for Legends ZA, which is why the story for BDSP was actually pretty refreshing when I played through it this time. In BDSP, the villainous team Galactic, led by Cyrus, aims to create a new world free of emotion, spirit, and strife. Cyrus believes emotions are the source of human suffering, so his goal is to use the power of Dialga or Palkia to erase the current universe and rebuild one under his complete control. Already a much higher stakes story than what you get with Legends ZA. You meet with Cyrus multiple times, fight through many Galactic grunts, and a lot of the Team Galactic generals. Many of them were actually pretty mean to you and your friends. It was pretty refreshing actually, because in ZA everyone is so overly nice. It was just kind of fun playing this game and seeing Barry getting bullied. And obviously BDSP is not voice acted, but it doesn't feel as jarring here as it does in the 3D Pokemon games. Legends ZA is just another reminder that Pokemon desperately needs some type of voice acting. The game feels fake. I'm not sure how to say it other than that. They feel emotionless. It doesn't feel like the characters in ZA actually have any emotion. They're fake. On the other hand, the DS style visuals in BDSP actually make the lack of voice acting feel a little bit more natural. It fits the style, so it doesn't hurt the emotional beats the way it does in the 3D Pokemon games. Because both of these games do give off completely different vibes. BDSP leans hard into nostalgia. Obviously, it's a remake. We get a whole region to explore, little towns, the familiar routes that we're used to, and of course, 8 gym badges to collect. It feels comforting, I don't know, like the classic Pokemon experience we all grew up with. And you could tell developers wanted to recreate that Diamond and Pearl feeling, even if it came at the cost of doing nothing new. And yeah, it's strange they decided to remake Diamond and Pearl instead of Platinum. Most likely it's because they wanted to sell 2 versions. But then why not do what Game Freak did with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? Whereas were pretty faithful remakes, but it also gave us the Delta episode to fill in the Emerald gap. BDSP doesn't do that. Instead, it removes content from the original games like the Battle Tower. They made a lot of weird choices where it feels like they wanted to be as nostalgic as possible, but in the end it feels a little incomplete. Legends ZA, on the other hand, is almost the complete opposite of what BDSP offers. Honestly, it's very easy to forget that you're even in Kalos since the entire game takes place in Lumio City, and with that transition we lose a lot of what made Kalos special. All the memorable areas in Kalos are replaced with wild zones, which, let's be honest, are a complete downgrade from what we got in Legends Arceus. The city feels empty here. The streets are wide but lifeless and the NPCs barely move. And the lighting is flat, okay? The city's not nice. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel like a real city, more like a background meant to convince you that you're somewhere bigger than you actually are. And that brings us to one of the biggest differences between these two games: the way they look. While both have major problems with their world, the visual plays a huge role. So I have been holding back about talking about this, but let's finally get it out of the way. BDSP is probably most famous for its chibi art style. It was a complete miss for many people in the fan base, and I think that Game Freak and Niantic thought that people would love this since so many people were hating on Sword and Shield at the time. They probably didn't feel comfortable remaking Diamond and Pearl in that style since these were very hyped up remakes. And when they finally announced these games, there was a lot of backlash. And in my opinion, it wasn't the fact that they went chibi that messes with people. It's that the characters look so strange and goofy. Yes, they are pretty visually accurate to their DS counterparts, but it just doesn't work. The art style is not doing enough to save it from that uncanny valley. You've heard it 100 times by now, but look at Link's Awakening. This is in a very similar style to BDSP, but the graphics in that game and the design of the characters put in so much work. Link doesn't look ugly and unrecognizable. He looks courageous and exactly like you would expect from a top-down Zelda game, where when you look at Lucas or Dawn in BDSP, they almost look nothing like their original selves. Especially Lucas, I don't know why he walks like that. And another thing that really messes up with the flow of BDSP is the changes between the chibi art style and then the more modern 3D style of the characters that you see during battles. Those models actually look pretty good and you only see them during battles. It genuinely feels jarring from talking to Cyrus like this and then going to this. He looks much more menacing in his full 3D model, and it sucks that this failed because it probably scared Game Freak from ever trying something like this again. It's probably why they have been so reluctant to release the Gen 5 remakes. They probably can't decide what art style to go with now since people kind of hate all of their new approaches, for good reason too. Pokémon Legends ZA is a perfect example of a modern 3D Pokemon game that just looks awful. I don't know why Game Freak can't seem to figure out a way to make 3D Pokemon games look good. I mean, we are in the Switch. There are so many Switch games that look great. I mentioned this in the previous video as well, but The Witcher 3 runs on the original Switch with all of its DLCs. There's multiple cities in that game with buildings that you can enter and NPCs that you can interact with. For some reason, Legends ZA has flat surfaces everywhere. The balconies are flat, the windows are flat, the sidewalks are flat, everything is just a JPEG. And honestly, if we explored all of Kalos and there were multiple cities like this, I would let this type of graphics slide. But the fact that the entire game takes place in just Lumio City, it's hard to believe that this is the end product. And we got confirmation that the upcoming DLC will not be taking us anywhere new. We are just going to be getting an upside down version of Lumio City. So expect the same exact buildings, windows, and everything. And keep in mind that this game had a hefty production time. Game Freak for once took more than 1 year to work on this game, and still, this is what we ended up with. Who really knows what's going on behind the scenes with Game Freak, but there's got to be a change here. You cannot have your newest games coming out looking like this. And with no voice acting, it's starting to feel really bad to be a Pokemon fan. And at this point, the backlash will only be getting worse. Luckily, both these games run pretty decently. Keyword decent. I played both on the Switch too, and I actually had no frame drops on ZA, but the drop distance in that game is horrendous, even on Nintendo's newest hardware. BDSP on the other hand ran pretty decent, but I did notice some frame rate drops here and there, and then some random slowdowns in some specific sections. Especially early on in the game, it would feel like it was just lagging when I encountered Pokemon, and the music would sometimes be out of sync with what was happening. But how do both of these games feel to play in 2025? Well, in Legends ZA's case, Pokemon's engine, graphics, and of course lack of voice acting is really starting to show its age. The game still gives you some new ways to play while yanking a lot of what made Legends Arceus good. And I think overall that's my biggest problem with ZA. You had a game that was unexpectedly pretty good with Legends Arceus and had the opportunity to build on that, like most sequels do. But instead of leaning into the exploration and discovery of the last Legends game, Game Freak decided that they would throw all of that out the window, a flat window by the way, and instead focus on a city that they obviously had no real passion to make interesting. And if you want to hear about all the other content ZA removed from Arceus, check out my full ZA review. We didn't touch on everything here, but that would give you a lot more context. Now, playing BDSP in 2025 does feel a little bit different than it did at release. Unfortunately, the chibi art style is still pretty horrible, and the lack of platinum events and the removed content doesn't really make this the best way to play Gen 4 Sinnoh, which I think is this game's biggest fault. This should have easily been the best way to play Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, just like Heart Gold and Soul Silver and Auras are the best way to play those games. But I will say, after playing the more recent Pokemon games and then going back to BDSP, I do think I was a little bit too harsh. Look, the old 8 gyms, fight an evil team, beat the Elite Four story is kind of played out now, but it works. And whenever Game Freak tries something new, it's not always a guarantee that it will work. With the way that the story is structured in Legends ZA, it definitely needed something like an evil team or an overarching goal other than just reaching rank A. Therefore, the flow of gameplay feels better in BDSP, and again, the jump in difficulty with the Elite Four is a very pleasant surprise. So I think you guys know where I'm going with this. Do I still think that BDSP is the worst Pokemon game? And I think now, going back to it and playing it with the knowledge of ZA, I can pretty confidently say that no, it is not the worst, but not by much. Both of these games fail at much at what they could have been. Legends ZA was not a good sequel for Legends Arceus or X and Y, and BDSP was not a good remake of what is often looked at as one of the best Pokemon generations to ever come out. But if I had to pick a game that I truly think is the worst, my current standing is going to be Pokemon Legends ZA. Hi, and thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate you. So this part is everything that I couldn't fit into the actual script, but I felt like it was important to mention stuff that really either annoyed me or I thought were just really bad decisions. So the first one is the Platinum outfit in BDSP. I don't know how to get it, okay? I bought the game at launch and I have it on my original file, but I could not seem to get it this time around. I think from what I researched, it's like a timed exclusive outfit, and apparently you just can't get it anymore. So I don't know. Maybe I'm dumb and I just don't know where to find it, and if there is a way to get it, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm very curious because I spent some time looking for it and I could not find how to get the goddamn thing. The other thing was Mega Evolutions. Obviously, we got Megas back in ZA, but I just felt like they were kind of missing in BDSP. There's a lot of Pokemon in the game that can Mega Evolve, and it felt weird not having them. If Let's Go could have Megas, it being a spin-off, I felt like BDSP, that would have been an easy, like, you know, just throw the Megas in there, Lucario, Abomasnow. It just seemed like an easy slam dunk, something they should have added, and I'm disappointed they didn't. Lastly, the fire Pokemon situation is still very real in this game. There is hardly any fire Pokemon in here, and the underground that they added to this game is not that great. It was super disappointing. I felt like there was not a lot of new Pokemon available there, and I only found a Houndoom, and that was it. Just one other fire Pokemon option other than Ponyta, pretty much, in the entire game. Like, it didn't have to be that faithful, guys. We could have added more fire Pokemon. And that's pretty much it. If you guys are interested in more of my Legends ZA thoughts, I posted more videos on the channel. Please check those out. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're almost at 3,000 subscribers, and I really want to hit that goal by the end of the year if possible. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It really does help a lot. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for getting to this point of the video. I really appreciate it. I can't express how much I appreciate it, but I hope you have a good day, night, whatever time it is where you're at. Hope you have a good one. Peace.